Hey guys, I am Chris and you are watching Marksman TV. Welcome back to another weekly used gun review. Now the format of this week's video is going to be a little bit different, and if I can borrow some of your time I will explain. So in this video I'm going to be doing 5 firearms instead of the typical 8. The reason for that is I've actually been doing these videos for about 2 years now, and before it was the weekly used gun review, it was the used guns of the week. You can go see those over on BitChute. They got removed, and I have previous videos explaining that. But through all these episodes I've done, combined over 100, at 8 firearms apiece, that's over 800 firearms. I'm running into the problem of finding firearms to talk about that have not already been on videos. Now I have rehashed some firearms before. If the history on them is different enough to warrant them being covered again, that would be like a USGI M1 carbine versus an auto ordnance M1 carbine, things like that, a real Thompson versus an auto ordnance Thompson. But by and large, I hate to talk about the exact same firearm with the exact same history when I can avoid it. I've kind of gotten into this place where most of the firearms coming in are firearms I've already talked about, so I'm having sort of fewer to pick from, if you will, which is putting me in this rut of not being able to get these videos out as often as I would like to. Also, with 8 firearms at about, I'm typically going a little bit overboard and going upwards of 5 minutes plus a piece, the videos are reaching over 40 minutes. I've heard from many people that they're sort of a little bit too long, so I figured by going down to 5 firearms I can keep the amount of information and history and sort of content in that regard on each individual one, with scaling down the overall length of the video, making them a little bit easier to watch. I know a lot of you guys have busy days. Now, it is the audience. I know the weekly used gun reviews are enjoyed by many on my channel, and it's a reason a lot of you are here, and I really appreciate that. So I don't want this to sort of ruin the integrity of what the videos have been. Please let me know down in the comment section if you guys don't like this idea, you want me to stick with 8, I am happy to do that, but please keep in mind it means I'm going to be doing them less frequently like I have been, about one every 2 to 3 weeks, which again I'm happy to do. Alternatively, if I'm scaling it down to 5, the videos are a little shorter. I don't need as many unique firearms. I can get these hopefully out every 1 to 2 weeks, get them out more frequently for you guys. So please let me know down in the comment section. I will try and get a feel for what is more popular, and I will go that direction for you guys. So thank you for listening, thank you for commenting and watching and letting me know what you guys want and enjoy. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into this video. Alright guys, remember the format of this video is we start with most common and move through least common as the video progresses, starting us off with our first spot. What we have here are a couple really interesting pistols, and these are Shadow System handguns. This is the MR920 and this is the CR920, both 9mm. Now, Shadow Systems as a company is actually a pretty new business that was founded around 2016 in Plano, Texas. It does employ about 100 employees, and they have a lot of different experiences and skill sets, anything from former military to law enforcement to competitive shooters. So with all those sort of different practicalities and philosophies in mind, they've really put together a handgun series that can fit into many different applications. And they are very interesting, and they become very, very popular in such a short amount of time. Now, looking at them at their face, they sort of look like customized Glocks. In fact, when I first saw them, what I assumed that they were Glock 19s or Glock 17s that have been highly modified and customized, as there are some other companies that have been playing with that sort of thing, that sort of mindset and different products that they had put out already in the future. But really, on the Shadow Systems design, all of their products, the frames, the barrels, the slides, the trigger groups, and all of that is actually made in-house by them. And an interesting component of the pistols is a little bit of modularity and customization along or within the confines of what would be a production firearm line. Going through a little bit of sort of what they have is they have a different series of pistols, just like Glock does with, like, if we look at the 9mm, like the 26, the 43X, the 19, the 17, the 45, the 19X, etc. Shadow Systems has a similar type of lineup. So the first is their CR, which is their subcompact, which is what this is, which sort of falls in line with the 43X or the Hellcat or the Sig P35. It's sort of a double stack, 1.5 stack, if you will, 13+1 capacity, and serves in that subcompact role. So I guess you could equate it to like a 43X or maybe the Glock 26. Then you go up to the MR, which is the compact, which is this, which should be really related to something like a Glock 19, which is 15+1 in the magazine. Then the DR, which is the full size, I don't have one here on the table, which is the 17+1, which could be like the Glock Model 17. They have the MRL, which is the compact frame with the DR slide, essentially. So a long slide compact frame, the compact frame being the 15+1. Then the XR, which is the compact slide on the larger frame, which should be something like a Glock Model 45 at 17+1. And then the DRP, which is the full-size performance center with a compensator on it. Now, outside of that, you have the Elite and the Combat. I do have an Elite and a Combat. This MR920 is a Combat, and the Combat's their basic line. You have the serrations on both sides, but not along the top. On the Elite, what they had is the serrations on both sides along the side, but they added serrations up here at the top as well, and then these lightning cuts into the side. So if you see these lightning cuts, that's the quickest giveaway that it is the Elite. Now, out of those baseline options, you can also get the sort of what I want to like copper colored barrel. There's some different trigger component options, and then there's the optics cut. So both of these have optics cuts. Typically, the Elites come standard with the optics cut. It's the multi-platform optics cut, which is patent pending through Shadow Systems, but the Combat does have the option of whether you want to put an optics cut on it or not. So really cool in terms of the different modularity and things that you can do. Now, I am a big fan of Glock, as a lot of you know, and again, as I alluded to at the beginning of this segment, this does take a lot of the stylizing cues of the Glock. It has a little bit more of an aggressive grip texture, not like the Generation 4 or 5 Glocks. It's more of like a gritty type sandpaper like you see on like Hellcat products. Very low grit though, so even for me, I don't like overly aggressive grips. It actually feels super comfortable to me, so I actually think it's a pretty cool product. Back straps does come in a nylon zipper case inside of a cardboard box. So not much else to say about these, but the Shadow Systems, I've been seeing them come through here. I've had a lot of used ones. I've never taken the opportunity to snag a couple and just do a quick little cut on these for the weekly used gun review. So really, really cool products, and I did have a couple of their different options, both the Combat and the Elite, and 2 of their different sizes, so I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about these. So if you guys have never gotten your hands on one and you like Glock products, I've actually never had the opportunity to take one to the range, so I've never shot one. Can't give you really my opinions on those, but I have shot a ton of Glocks. And this to me just feels right at home. The grip angle, sort of the blocky nature of the slide, the sight picture, of course you're not getting the U-dot. You have a blacked out serrated rear with a sort of a high profile day-night sight here in the front. Really cool product, so I would love to take one out. And I know a lot of people who have shot them have said that the reliability and the accuracy especially is really on par with what you're paying for other products. Now, they are priced a little bit higher, new out of the box, in the $700 price range, or plus or minus, I should say, depending on the option you go with. Used are going to fall actually pretty close to that if they're in excellent condition, maybe short of 50 to 100 bucks off the price tag of a used one, depending on condition and what the options are. So anyway, really cool products. Wanted to share those with you guys on the video. Okay, up next is a very interesting revolver, and this one coming to us from a viewer in Wisconsin. So thank you so much for selling this one to us. This is the Ruger Bearcat 22 caliber revolver. It is a single action. Follows much of the same principles as a single action Army, although based off of the Remington single action design, where you go to half cock, you can load your rounds into the cylinder. You have an ejector rod underneath the barrel. You have the base pin retention spring here to remove the cylinder. Now, this would actually go into development with Ruger in about 1954, and it hit the market on scale in about 1956. Now, the interesting thing about this is it was designed, or I should say produced, in 3 different configurations. The Bearcat, which you see here, the Super Bearcat, and the new Bearcat, and I'll talk about the differences between the 3. So based off of the first one was really known as really you could distinguish it against the others as having an alloy frame, so it is a little bit lighter. The whole purpose of this is if you took something like a Remington or a Colt single action design and you scaled it down by about 20 to 30%, make it out of lightweight materials. This makes a really good kit gun, camping gun, backpacker's gun, maybe a small concealed carry to keep inside the vehicle, or if you're, going mushrooming or something, you want something for snakes, anything along those lines. It was really meant to be a utilitarian outdoorsman type of sidearm, but did really carry with it really nice streamlined ergonomics and a really nice aesthetic appeal, which has led it to be a very collectible revolver today. Now, through the production of this, this actually particular one was made in 1970, just a year before they would move into the second model, which was known as the Super Bearcat. Now, the Super Bearcat was different from the Bearcat insofar as it did have a steel frame instead of the alloy, making the weight a little bit heavier, but also making the durability of this better, especially for the intended purpose of being a backpacker's gun. So it could take a little bit more abuse and had a little bit more longevity of life. Now, a few years later, in 1974, a couple interesting things happened. Ruger would patent the transfer bar. This is what you see on a lot of the modern Ruger revolvers today, like the Blackhawks, the Redhawks, and things like that. And what the transfer bar essentially is a bar that rests back here behind the firing pin face and between the hammer. And essentially what's happening is when you pull the trigger, a bar mechanism inside will lift up in between the back of the firing pin and the front of the hammer face, allowing a surface for the two to connect. Now, if the bar is not there, the distance between the hammer face and the back of the firing pin will actually leave a gap where it can not actually discharge the round. So if you're carrying it with the hammer back and you were to drop it and break the hammer sear and send the hammer into the back of the firing pin, it actually will not discharge because it will not connect. The only way to bring up that connecting surface or that transfer bar is by virtue of pulling on the trigger. So it was a safety feature through the late 1970s that was deemed to be really necessary for future firearm or handgun or revolver design specifically from Ruger. Now, they would discontinue the Bearcat line around that time. The reason that was provided by Ruger was the package was too small in order to incorporate the transfer bar design at that time. Now, you could say that that was the real reason that they did that. There are some rumors about something about a cataloging issue, and I'll explain that in a minute. But by about the mid-90s, about 1993, they had actually released the last iteration of the Bearcat, known as the new Bearcat, where they actually did incorporate the transfer bar. So it was actually achievable to get a transfer bar in a package this size. And then on the new model through the 1990s, they did offer it with a 22 Magnum conversion cylinder as well. Now, you can find transfer bars in older models. You could get them converted by sending them back to Ruger to have a transfer bar installed if you wanted to do that. As collectibles, that would actually decrease the value. This particular one has not had the transfer bar modification. So that's just usually a plus for collectors. Now, to that cataloging issue I alluded to. So in 1974, Ruger would send out a catalog for their new products, and this is typically the way things were done with wholesaling, distribution, and things like that, obviously before the days of the internet. So the manufacturers would send catalogs out to the wholesalers or to larger prominent dealers. They would fill out an order sheet with all the products that they wanted, and then, with a check, and then Ruger would ship them the firearms. Now, it has been reported that, and this was actually based on an interview with Bill Ruger himself in the 1980s, that in that particular catalog of 1974, they omitted accidentally the Bearcat offering from the catalog. So when all the orders came in, there were no Bearcat orders, and Ruger, not realizing that they had omitted the entire Bearcat line from the catalog, had assumed, wow, all these dealers, all these wholesalers, not a single Bearcat order. There must be zero demand for this thing, so let's go ahead and remove it from our product line, and that's what they did. Again, that's speculation on whether that was truly the case or not, but Bill Ruger did state that that happened in a 1980s interview. So, very interesting. If we look at the Bearcat values on the market today, they are steadily climbing. There are a lot of people who are interested in these as collectibles. You tend to find the first pattern unmodified like this, typically between the $400 and $500 mark. Now, in really good condition with the box, they will go higher than that. The second models will, the Super Bearcat with the steel frame maybe lag a little bit behind in value, and then of course the 1990s model, the new Bearcat, would lag behind that as well. So the first generation like this would be the most desirable, but still they are not unobtainable. They are still very affordable in the $400 to $500 mark. So anyway, very interesting. Thought I would share that one with you guys. All right, up next is a very popular pistol that comes to us from a viewer in Texas. So thank you so much for selling this one to us. This is the Sig P225, which was adopted by the German police forces as the model P6. I'll explain a little bit about what that means. This is a single stack 9mm double single action pistol. It does have a decocker on it like you see on a lot of Sig pistols today, like the 226 or the 227, 228, 229, all of that line. The story with this would actually begin in 1972 with the Munich Olympics massacre. Now, at the time, the German police forces were issuing things like the PP pistol, which were chambered in .32 automatic. Of course, there were P1s and later P4s that were used in police service in the 9mm, but by and large, the police doctrine at that time, especially in Europe, was a small frame, small caliber pistol, as due to criminal activity at that time was not very rampant and it was not very heavy, so pistols were really not used that often in defensive use of other civilian life or police life in general, as it was usually a lot of petty crime and things like that. Now, in 1972, in the Munich Olympics massacre, you have this horrible act of terrorism that would be a wake-up call to the modernization or the need for the modernization of police forces, tactical units within police forces, and things like that. So around the 1970s, that's when that starts. Now, the German police forces decide that they're going to need to move into something that's got more robustness, more firepower, more capacity, and in a larger cartridge. So, in 1974, they put out trials for a new police service pistol. Now, in the 74 trials, they would basically have two main entrants. They would have the Walther PP Super and the Sig P238. Now, both nice designs, but was quickly kind of found out in those trials that still the philosophy of those two pistols is small caliber, small size. So they decided, okay, we need to revamp our sort of what we are looking for in this new design. We want to focus on 9mm parabellum round, making that a necessity, moving away from smaller calibers. We want to get into a larger capacity, so they had size and weight parameters as well. Now, quickly, because this would be a large contract, several prominent manufacturers would get to the drawing board and want to come up with what would be the ultimate new German police pistol. Now, of those would be Mauser, Sig, HK, and Walther. And all four would put forth their first submissions. Now, Sig's actual first submission was the model P220. In 1975, so around this time, Sig had actually won contracts with the Swiss military with the P220 and 9mm. So they wanted to submit this as well. However, the P220 did not fit within the specification parameters of this new German police pistol program, so they quickly redesigned a new product based off of the P220, which would be scaled down a little bit in size, weight, complexity of manufacture, and cost of manufacture, and that would be the P225, which is essentially this. Now, in the trials, HK would put forth the HK PSP, Walther with the P5, you had Sig with the P225, and Mauser with the HSP. Now, through all trials, all four pistols fared very well. There was one that fell off almost immediately, and that was the Mauser HSP. But there was a lot of, appreciation of different elements of the other three designs: the Walther P5, the Sig P226, and then the HK PSP. Now, there were some pros and cons of each. One of the best in terms of performance, reliability, and accuracy would be the HK. The best in terms of cost of manufacture would be the Sig, and then the Walther would sort of share elements of both. So what they ultimately decided to do is, instead of selecting one pistol to be sort of the uniform police pistol all across Germany, is they would let all police forces select their own pistol. They would adopt the Walther P5 as the P5, the Sig P225 as the P6, and the HK PSP as the P7, and then let the German police forces select their own. Now, out of the three, there were like special police forces that would go with things like the P7, like GSG9, but most police forces for most police use would actually adopt the P6. So this would be the most commonly accepted and used pistol, was the P6. Again, mainly due to the exchange between reliability, function, ergonomics, and a big thing would be production costs. There was a lot of interesting elements, like the breech block being machined separately and pinned into the slides. There's a lot of cost-saving elements of this pistol, but it was also a really, really good, durable design that lasted for a long time and was very easy to train new police recruits on. Now, as mentioned, this was adopted in 9mm. It is a single double action with a decocker. One interesting feature of the P6 that you'll notice, and again against versus the civilian P225, is this hooked hammer on the back. That's one of the quickest ways to tell the difference. The other is the trigger pull. The P6 has a substantially heavier trigger than the civilian P225. But that hook in the back was actually due to you could look to the German police manual, is actually meant to be crushed if dropped on its spur. So if you dropped it, that hook would actually collapse in, closing that circuit there on the back of the hammer. So if this went back to an armorer could tell right away that that had been dropped on the hammer, and they would know to replace those internal parts or at least check them for damage. So that was sort of the reason for that. These would actually stay with German police use up until about the mid-90s, when they would start to phase them out. And then the P6s would actually hit the US commercial market in about 2000. They were very, very inexpensive, very high quality pistols. So these things were bought up like crazy by civilian gun enthusiasts here in the United States. Now lately they have started to increase in price due to not only the fact that they are an excellent handgun, but also have that German police military history sort of as a collectible. So they are going up in price. Most of the ones you see are like this, where they have significant holster wear and things like that, have a lot of character. With the original box manual and 2 magazines, you're starting to see them creep up through the $500 price point. If you get them with original box manual and like excellent, virtually unissued condition, they can top $700 plus. So a really, really nice ergonomic handgun. The only limitation as far as like the current market today is the fact it is a single stack magazine for its size and weight. But if you're able to get it as a bargain, they are nice range shooters, collectibles, and could be used as sort of a toss around, backup sidearm, tackle box gun, anything like that. So truck gun. So very cool. Happy to get that one in and share it with you guys. Okay, up next is a very interesting collectible pistol. This one coming to us from a local customer. This is a Sauer Model 38H chambered in .32 automatic. It features a detachable box magazine. It does have a safety, and an interesting thing is it has a lever on the side here that can cock and decock the firearm. Interesting feature that you would see on current day Sig Sauer type products where it doesn't really recock, but this sort of decock lever here on the side. So we'll talk about that too. Now, the 38H by Sauer and Sons is an interesting evolution built out of necessity of competition. So we'll talk a little bit about that. If we're talking about the turn of the century into the 1900s, there is a growing need for small subcompact concealed carry pistols. The whole philosophy of self-loading pistols in general was a pretty nascent idea. Now, I call them the so-called first generation concealed carry pistols, especially when we're talking about German handguns. You have the Sauer Model 1913, you have the Mauser Model 1910 and 1914 that were all very dominant in this space. I've talked about both of those pistols on this channel, and you can refer back to those in previous episodes. Now, the Sauer 1913 and the Mauser Model 1910 and later Model 1914 pistols were very, very popular in the European market, especially in the days leading up to World War I. In fact, they would be folded into German World War I era military service as personal sidearms for infantry and officers, usually purchased outside of the realms of what would be issued as a military implement. But they did see a lot of use. There was inside the trenches a lot of soldiers to depend on them very heavily. Now, in the conclusion of World War I through the interwar period, of course, the Model 1914 Mauser, which was a .32 automatic, and the Sauer Model 1913, which was also a .32 automatic single-stack magazine pistols, were very popular. Of course, they were used as everyday concealed carry sidearms. But for the modern standard, they were a little bit complicated. They were not wholly reliable, especially if you introduced them to such arduous military conditions as mud and trenches and things like that. They were manufactured with a really nice bluing, really nice finish, and they had somewhat of a unique, interesting, and somewhat unconventional design. Now, in the early 1930s, Walther would enter the game with the Walther Model PP and PPK pistols. They were very, very popular. They were very easy to produce. They were more affordable. They were nice, handy, well-balanced, good size, lightweight, and most importantly, they were very accurate and very reliable. Now, almost overnight, the PP and the PPK line would overtake the small concealed carry market in Germany as well as Europe in general. So through the 1930s, Mauser and Sauer would start to see very much declining sales of their pistols. So they would both quickly go back to the drawing board and come up with new models. Now, Mauser would come up with the HSC pistol. Very heavy influence off of the PP and PPK design in terms of its overall balance, look, and weight. Sauer in 1938 would come out with this pistol, the 38H, also chambered in .32 automatic. So this is what would lead into what I call the second generation of European small self-loading concealed carry pistols, which would be now the Walther PP and PPK, the Mauser HSC, and the Sauer 38H. Now, subsequently, from 1938 to 1939, we have the ramping up of what would inevitably be the Second World War. Now, because these are manufactured at home in Germany, they would also be folded into German military service, seeing military acceptance proofs like this one has here, Waffen-Amps, if you will, which are also seen on PPs, PPKs, and HSCs. They would also be commercially purchased, and they would be privately purchased by officers and things like that, and used in the Second World War as well. Because of that, these would come home as war trophies, and you could find them with capture papers and things like that. So this would typically be found in the lineup of what you would expect to see in sort of the lineup of German manufacturer World War II sidearms. Very nice, very sleek design. Now, an interesting feature of this was the cock and decock feature found on the left-hand side of the pistol, which elements of are used on Sig Sauer, not wholly related to the original Sauer of the time, but the Sig Sauer pistols of today. So very early implementation of that type of feature. Very nice pistols. I've actually fired several of these, and they work really well. They have very nice light recoil impulse, as all steel construction 32 automatic pistol would. So anyway, that's essentially the story on that. If we're talking about price on the market today, they are creeping up just like everything else. All match in good condition examples like this you might find in the $600 to $700 range. If you find them in more excellent condition with a couple magazines, holster, and things like that, these may top off right now at about around the $800 plus range. So very interesting, unique World War II pistol, World War II era pistol. Happy to get that in and share it with you. Okay, last but not least is a very interesting pistol that comes to us from a local customer. This is a Radom Polish Model 35, or known by many different people as the VIS, or the P35, the 35P, the Radom, however you want to know it as. And it did have a couple different names because of some German usage as well, which we'll talk about. Now, the P35, or the VIS pistol, is a single action only 9mm single box magazine fed handgun. Now, in the 1930s, like a lot of other countries around the world, Poland is wanting to modernize on its military equipment, and that would also include their service sidearm. Now, it had been looking around and noticing some innovations taking place in other countries, most notably those innovations of John Moses Browning. The United States would adopt his pistol design in 1911, as well as over in Belgium, they're making headwinds with the new high-power design. The new 9mm pistol or 9mm cartridge is starting to gain momentum in a lot of other countries like Germany. And you have the nice reliability and ergonomics of the 1911 and high-power design. So Poland around 1931, 1932 would start to try and derive their own pistol design. Now, they would come up with this, and through a series of trials, retesting, and redesigning, by 1935 they would release specifically this pistol. It does take obvious influences from the 1911 and high-power designs, and is somewhat of a hybrid of both chambered and 9mm. Now, they would start with small-scale production being used mainly for the Polish cavalry, but as time would go on, by about 1938, they would have about 50,000 of these in inventory and be issuing these across all branches of their military forces. Now, unfortunately, by 1939, Germany would invade Poland, would capture and occupy Poland, and would take over the Radom plant, where production of this would cease. Now, the Radom plant under German occupation for a couple of years would actually just sit there not really producing anything. By about 1941, Germany starts to realize, okay, we have occupation forces in all these different countries, let's go ahead and scale up on their domestic arms manufacturing on their own designs with their own labor and fold those firearms into German military service. This was most notably done with handguns. That's why you see German Waffen-Amp proof. This is has a Waffen-Amp number 77. You see these on the Polish VIS pistols. You see them on the high powers. There were pistols that were actually given to Germany from Allied forces, like I guess Spain you wouldn't call an ally, more of a neutral force, but from Spain you get the Spanish Astra pistols, the Italian 1934, 1935 pistols. So Germany was very handgun intensive, and they issued or rolled in production from many different countries, whether allied with or occupying, and this was no exception. Now, this would actually be produced under Germany in 4 different variations. The first was the traditional design, which was a little bit complicated to produce. It had a stock lug right back here, a socket, I guess you would say, right here in the back, so you could actually put on a shoulder stock like the early high powers or the C96 broom handle pistols. Also on this side, you have all different sorts of controls. You have a slide stop lever here. You have a takedown assist lever here, so when you pull it back, you can slide this into this notch here. That sort of aids you in knowing where to keep the pistol for disassembly. See if I can do that here, like that. And then back here you have a hammer drop back here, a decocker, I guess you would say. Now, in the first production run, it would have all those features, but as the war would go on, like everything else German and Japanese made, production would simplify so they could get firearms produced more quickly. So in the second variation, which would actually be this one, they would actually delete that socket in the back, But keep these 3 levers here on the left-hand side, and then go to a more sort of a rudimentary, sort of very, I should say, crude bluing process. So this is a second variation. On the third variation, they would keep all those same features, except they would also delete the takedown assist lever. So now you would call it this so-called 2-lever pistol. That's the third variation. And on the fourth variation, they would go to a phosphate finish, a wood panel sort of slab side grip, and then they would actually also in later production delete this the decocker lever here. So you would just have the slide stop lever magazine release with a crude phosphate finish and slab panel grips, making it the ultimate cheap to produce Radom VIS P35 pistol. Germany would actually produce quite a few of these, and you could actually, finding them with the German proof markings is actually easier than finding them with the original Polish eagle markings on them as far as collectability goes. But a very interesting pistol, and of course serves as both Polish and German military history, especially if we're looking within the context of World War II. Now on the market today, like everything else collectible, they're upping in price. Something like this, a second model, and again, your first models are going to be your most valuable. As they sort of simplified them, they would become less and less collectible. But something like this in this condition, you're looking at around the $700 to $800 mark. Now, earlier examples in pristine condition could top $1,000. I've seen some very collectible examples with the Polish Eagles and stuff on them top $2,000. So the market's really all over the board depending on which specimen you're looking at. Of course, things like original finish, matching numbers are also going to play a part. So, very interesting pistol. Happy to get this one in and share it with you guys, and we will end this video with that one. Well, that is all the time I have for you today on these. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out this video. If you enjoyed, please let me know by hitting that like button. Please also consider subscribing to my channel and hit that bell notification button so you are aware when I am posting new content. I'm going to leave you guys off there. I am Chris. You guys are watching Marksman TV, and we will see you next time.